In this project which we have here, we currently have only one page, the index.js page. Now there we're rendering some dummy product data. And it's very simple dummy product data, of course. Now what if our data there was a bit more complex? So every product also had a description, let's say. And I'll keep this very simple here since I want to focus on the Next.js features, not on this concrete example. So here the description is, this is product 1. It's one extra JSON key added here. And on the second product, this is product 2. And you might be able to imagine what it will be on the third product. Yes, this is product 3. Now the idea could be that on the index.js file, we render a list of products, and every product is a clickable link, which takes us to a detail page where we then also see the description of the product. So similar to what we built before in our project with the events, we have a detail page for the products. And for this, we can of course add a new page with a dynamic segment between square brackets. And here we could name this PID for product ID, but that identifier is up to you, .js. So that's now a dynamic page. Alternatively, we create a folder named PID like this, and in there we then have an index.js file, but I'll stick to this setup. And here we could now add a component function, which is the product detail page, let's say. And the idea is that in this component, on this page, we show the product details. So to keep this simple, I just want to return, let's say, a fragment here, imported from React. And there I then have a h1 tag with the title of the product, and below that a paragraph with the description. But that data should now be fetched from the dummy backend JSON file as well. Now again, of course, we could write standard React code here, so to say, and use useEffect, imported from React, to send a HTTP request to some server which might provide this product data. But then we're back in the world where that data is not there when this page is initially rendered. So search engines still wouldn't see it. So that's not what we'll do here. Instead, what we will do here is we will again use this async prop function. So we'll export this async function getStatic props. This function is again a function we can use here. And here we then again want to reach out to the backend JSON file, but now instead of reading the entire file and returning all products, I want to read the file and only return one product from that file. That will be the difference. And therefore, of course, we need to know which product should be returned here. And of course, that's something we can determine by looking at the concrete value, which is in the URL. So the concrete value for this PID key here. That's where this context parameter again becomes important, because I did briefly mention before that we can use this context parameter, which is exposed to us by Next.js, to get hold of the concrete param values. So the concrete values for these dynamic segments in our paths. We do get access to that by having a look at the params key in context. Now that's not a name I came up with. Instead, that is one of the properties exposed by this context object, which is given to you by Next.js. And params is an object full of key value pairs where the keys are the identifiers for the dynamic path segments. So in this case, PID, which is the only dynamic parameter of this page here. And the values are the concrete values that were entered in the URL. So here I then get my product ID by accessing params.pid, PID, because that's what I picked here on the file name. Now one quick note about extracting the params here to avoid confusion. Of course, you can also extract params through the useRouter hook inside of the component function. That's what we did before in this course. We got access to that router object with the useRouter hook, and we extracted params with router.query. Now, there is a difference between extracting params in the component function and in getStaticProps. When we extract these params in the component function, we can use them inside of the component, for example, to use that extracted ID to send a request to some backend server to fetch data from there. But that would then only happen in the browser. If we want to pre-render a page with help of getStaticProps, which we use to prepare the data for pre-rendering the page, then this happens on the server. And as I explained, getStaticProps runs before the component function runs. It needs to run before that because the component function is then executed to pre-render the page. So if you plan on preparing a page on the server or during the build process with getStaticProps, then you need to get access to the params, so to that dynamic path segment inside of getStaticProps, so that you can use the param data here to prepare the data for the component. Then we don't need to extract that dynamic segment in the component function, unless we also need it there for some reason. But for preparing the data, we then want to do that in getStaticProps. And now with that, we could reach out to our file, to the dummy backend JSON file, and try to read that product with that ID. So for this, I'll briefly copy that code from index.js, where I get access to this dummy backend JSON file. And I'll therefore also grab those imports here and add them to pit.js like this. And now that we got hold of this file, I just want to filter my data, the products in there to be precise, for a product with this ID. So here I'll then get my product by reaching out to data products and calling find there. And then we pass a function to find, which is executed on every product in that array. And we want to return true here if the ID of the product we're currently looking at in that array is equal to the product ID we got here from our parameters. And if that is equal, we know that's the product we need for this component. So then here at the end of getStaticProps, we return an object with the props key. And here I then set my loaded product, let's say, equal to the product fetched here. Now there is a loaded product props available inside of the product detail page. So here we can extract this, maybe again with object destructuring. We can get this from the props, which we should accept therefore. And then it's this loaded product from which we can read the title and the description. So here it's then loaded product.description. Now, in order to test this, we need to make sure we can go to this detail page. And therefore, from the index.js file, I will wrap the text inside of the list item with the link component, which of course needs to be imported again from next link. So that still needs to be imported. Then I move the product title between those link tags. And then ref is set to a dynamic value, which I construct with a template literal, where I want to go to slash and then inject the product ID here. And with that, if we now save all, we got clickable links here. And if I click on a link, I get an error. GetStaticPaths is required. Now, that is an expected error, and it's an important one. So let's understand what it does, but before we do that, in the next lecture, I again want to emphasize that the code here is generally correct. We use params to get access to the concrete values encoded in the URL, and we can then use that extracted data to fetch a specific piece of data and expose this to the component. So this is not wrong, and still we have this problem. So let's understand where this is coming from.